Well, they say that you're a fool. You believe in magic. I'm Paranormal Pete, and I'm on a journey to seek answers to the questions that have crossed all of our minds. What happens to us when we die? Is there an afterlife? I'm a regular guy who discovered the gift of psychic mediumship in my 30s. My passion for history and the unknown have put me right here, right now. My mantra for anything paranormal is, we don't know much and anything is possible. Join me as we find our way through the stories, evidence, and experiences of the paranormal and beyond in search of answers, even if that leads to more questions. Are you with me? Hey everybody, welcome to the Paranormal Pete Show. I'm your host, Pete Orbea, and this is episode 102. Woohoo! We're here on WLTK-DB.com. It's right behind me here if you're watching. If you want to tune into future shows live, just go on all the socials, any of the streaming services out there for video or audio, and just look up WLTK-DB. Or you can download our station app. Just go to the Play Store and type in the station name, and you'll see it there. You can catch live shows, past shows. You can see all the different shows that are on the station, and there's a ton of great content right now coming out on the station. I think there's over 25 shows, and there's even more coming. So there's a lot of great content, a lot of great perspective and thought and experiences out there, and some incredible evidence too that you'll see on the station. So get the station app, and then if you're on the website, there's a new function on there. You can click to link the station's calendar to your calendar, so you know when all the shows are happening, and you can see who the host and who's coming up on the show. So check that out. That's a really neat function for those of us on the go, which I think is pretty much 100% of us always on the go. As always, check in where you're coming from. Say hi. We'll give you a shout out. You can ask questions throughout the show. Big shout out to Todd Bates, station owner here at WLTK-DB, and all the work he does behind the scenes, and all the others who help out with producing all the shows. So thank you very much. And if you like the intro music, of course, that's my band Steady Rock Cosmonaut. There's my shameless self-promotion. Go to steadyrockcosmonaut.com. And hope you enjoy the music. So we're hopefully we'll have more coming out soon. Next week, I've got a special guest, psychic medium Jennifer Page, coming on, and I'm really excited to talk to her. She also hosts the podcast I Talk to Ghosts. So that's coming up. And then I'll be making one more announcement for guest at the end, towards the end of the month. And housekeeping, I will be taking the month of June off from the show, just to catch a break for a little while and hopefully enjoy some sunshine up here in Washington. I hope it sticks around. But so we'll be doing previously run shows through June, but I will be back in July. So I'll miss everyone while I'm gone, but it's going to be nice to take a little break and get gathered for an upcoming next 100 episodes. So coming up, I always talk about ghost conferences, how important they are. It's great to meet people, hear other perspectives. So the most recent one that happened, Oregon Ghost Conference, next year is going to be March 22nd through 24th down in Seaside, Oregon. OregonGhostConference.com for that. Then there's the OC Paracon down in Anaheim. It's the first weekend in October. Looks like there's a lot of exciting stuff going on for that one. So check out ocparacon.com if you are in the area or plan to travel. You definitely want to check it out. And then, of course, we have the 14th annual Port Gamble Ghost Conference coming up November 10th through 12th this year, right here in Little Port Gamble, which, if you don't know, is on the west side of Puget Sound across from Seattle. So it's where I live and work and get to have a lot of fun here. I'll be putting out summer ghost walk tour and investigation dates soon. Last year I tried some out in the summer, and it was a lot of fun. Had big groups and great groups of people. And so I think I'll do it again this year. So I'll be posting some dates soon within the next couple weeks for that. And you can find out information for that or how to get a reading with me at portcampbellparanormal.com. It's on my hat there. And so I'll post dates and tickets and everything there. So be sure to stay tuned there. And I just hope everyone's doing well. It's been kind of a weird couple weeks for me, but feeling good. The sun's back out here in Washington. So when the sun's out, the fun's out. Getting tired of that gray weather. But tonight I've got a special guest, someone who I met through the Oregon Ghost Conference, and she's very kind. I think she does great work. Her approach is really, really great. So I look forward to talking to her tonight, Kay MacBean-Peden, and she has been an intuitive since childhood, and over time learned through the trial and error how to manage her abilities. She was intuitively guided to work with veterans at the age of 17 as a biographer and wanting to help them find their voice. Yet over time, she began openly using her intuitive abilities to assist them in working through trauma. She currently uses her abilities with clients across the globe with her psychic abilities, mediumship, energy work, coaching, and spiritual counseling via her practice, Daughter of Hope, and I'm going to have her say it in the Scots Gaelic when she comes on. It's a neat name, and she continues to provide assistance to veterans with her intuitive abilities as a part of equine assisted healing sessions via Heart Before the Horse in Astoria, Oregon, which Astoria is really cool if you've never been there. She also has taken on ancestral healing and making multiple trips to Scotland to connect with her family and in learning her endangered familial language. Her main focus is trauma work, but she loves to help others embrace their own joy and empowerment on all levels. Let's give a big Paranormal Pete Show welcome to Miss Kay MacBean-Peden. There we go. Hey, Kay.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's we're all seem busier after the pandemic. I don't know why, but everyone just, feels like everything's busier. But thanks for taking time to come on the show. And could you please, so that I didn't do it in injustice, what is your practice name in the Scots Gaelic?
Nee-an-an-doe-hass Daughter of Hope.
That's really cool. Well, tell us a little bit about your practice and what you do. And then, I want to talk a little bit about your equine work that you do and working with animals. And but tell us a little bit about your practice.
Um, it was really trial and error, being kind of thrown into the deep end from a really young age. Actually, I was really drawn to work with veterans from the time I was about 4 years old. I started with my grandfathers, and they were really gracious. They sat down with me, and there were so many things that were pulling me towards war. And so it started out as my wanting to connect with these people and to hear their story and to help them find their voice. It made my heart beat. And so I knew that it was my soul's calling from a really early age. But from the time I was 3, I had a lot of things happening, a lot of people that I was seeing and talking to that were not there. And I didn't know that other kids my age were not having that experience.
Okay.
Found that one out the hard way. And it all culminated into my working with vets and seeking them out and then writing their biographies. But then while I was talking to them, there were images coming through. And there was a man that I was working with that I'd become really good friends with. And I saw what happened to him in Quang Tri in Vietnam in 1967, right down to the words that he said. And he hadn't told anyone about it, not a single person since that night. And he told me, if this is happening, you should be sharing it with the other Marines that you're working with. So I started to do that. And that brought me out at the age of 27. And moving forward, I came out of the spiritual closet. And I've been so lucky because I started working with Renee Siapush, which she is an incredible woman. She's one of those people that when she sees a breakthrough with clients out in the pasture with the horses, providing equine assisted growth and learning, she will jump up and down and cry for you. She's such an amazing person. But in addition to that, she actually has bolstered my intuitive ability. And when I came out with that, she was like, you can totally use this here. And so we have groups of veterans come out once a week. And the first half is us working with the clients and helping them to connect with the horses. But then after that, I get about a full hour to be able to channel for them. So it's all culminated in my working with the public and then being able to integrate that with working with veterans, which has only been possible because I've had a lot of people be really gracious and kind with me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
well, it sounds like you've got a great support network, which is, super important in keeping up with the work. So I like that you mentioned as a kid that you didn't, you thought other kids were experiencing the same thing. I hear that a lot. I always ask my guests what it was like growing up, because everyone's different, but there are a lot of similarities, and that's one of the similarities and that kind of shows you how with kids how open they are, right? And for you to just naturally think that, well, everyone else has got to be experiencing the same thing too. It's quite an amazing thing. But in growing up and knowing, there's something more once you realize that other kids weren't experiencing the same thing. Did you have support from your family and kind of exploring it, or how'd that go?
No. So I grew up
Okay.
on my mother's side with a really religious background. Um, there was messaging from the church that we were attending, which was pretty strict, saying that that kind of stuff was evil. So I got that
Right.
messaging and just knew, okay, maybe I'm not to talk about this. But I was having open experiences, really big ones. I had premonitions with my paternal grandfather, um, and my maternal grandmother. They died within a few days of each other. And
Wow.
it came out of my mouth as if I couldn't control it. And I said it to my mother. And after that, we didn't talk about it after everything happened the way that I said it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So it was always my having these experiences and just trying to hold myself through it, which um, I think that really helped me because it taught me how to self manage. I didn't know that there were terms for anything that I was experiencing. Um, I got rattled quite a bit, so it taught me how to stand on my own 2 feet and to really lock down and just endure it. Later on, when I got older, suddenly I'm finding out that there are other people that are experiencing this, and there are names for these things. There's names for these types of abilities and the people that have them, and it was just like the top of my head blew off, and it gave me so much comfort and so much relief. But I met people like yourself that understand exactly what those experiences are like, and that, hey, this is actually normal.
Right.
I mean, some might not call it normal, but I call it normal because, it's your life experience. You don't know anything else.
Right. I think that's a great way to put it. I think most people that are do spiritual work and paranormal investigating, it is normal. The paranormal is normal for them. So that's a great way to put it. So I mean, when I talk to different people and I hear a story where there wasn't support, and you and your mom didn't talk about things after, your premonition. But I mean, looking back, would you say, would you change anything?
I don't think that I would. And it's funny that you asked me that because that's been on my mind quite a bit lately. Um, the rest of my life is progressing. I've hit that middle point where you start to review what's behind you and what should be ahead. I don't regret anything. It taught me
Yeah.
really how to face things and to face down my own fear. And I don't know that I would have done that with the amount of challenge that I would have needed, but it's gotten me through so many different things because when you learn that you can get through those moments and you can hold yourself through it, and
Yeah.
actually, my spirit guide's like, you may not have had your physical family, but what about us,
Yeah.
And that's so true because they were there, helping me and comforting me. And even my grandparents, after they passed on, they've been a huge part of that. So I have had people, and I'm sorry I forgot you guys, but as far as people in the 3D world, I think that it's great when we don't have support in a way. It's hard, but you learn how to really have confidence in what you're doing over time and to just trust. And
Yeah.
sometimes trial by fire is the best way to get you to learn how to trust, challenge.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's how my life's always been, is jump in the fire and learn, and I think I agree with you. My point I was going to get at, which you got to, is that it made you the person you are today by growing up that way and having to deal with that. And I think a lot of people go through that. And so I think, to hear someone like you, talk about, well, you don't regret it. I hope that gives some people hope out there that you may be feeling challenged. You may be feeling like, I'm just not going to do this. I can't do this, but trust in that, like, things will happen kind of how they're supposed to happen, right? And that those people, your non-dimensional crowd, they're pointing you in a way that we don't, they can point us in a way we don't recognize as we're being pointed in a direction, but it makes you who you are today. So thank you for sharing that. It's everybody's got a different story, but I agree with you that you almost have to go through challenge in this sort of thing to get that confidence, that sort of thing. My story, I just didn't realize what was going on until my 30s, and so I've had to kind of learn in a little bit different way, but by jumping in the fire as well. But but again, thank you for sharing that. You look like you wanted to say something.
No, I mean, I'm really interested in your feelings and thoughts on that, because I think honestly, it could be much harder actually having it come in later in your life, because you've had 30 years, right? Or 30 something years of living a life that you're very used to. And then suddenly it's like something breaks open and what is happening to me?
Yeah. And I blame Seth Michael for it. He's the one who did my first reading and broke everything open. And I guess I think I would just say that there's probably different challenges. But fortunately I grew up in a very open-minded house. That was, I talked before on the show, very much into science fiction. And so, I was very open-minded. And so it wasn't a total foreign thing to me that once I realized what was going on. However, before that happened, I was extremely skeptical of psychics because I didn't really know much, didn't have as much exposure to it, so as time, it's when the universal 2x4 hit me in the head, then it was like, oh, okay, maybe there's something to this. But it's a different set of challenges, I would say. And anybody watching out there, if you've experienced, did you experience growing up recognizing and using abilities, or did you, like me, later in life have the universal 2x4 smack you over the head and say, you're going to do this now? So go ahead and comment. We got Courtney checking in on YouTube. Hello, thanks for watching. So in your work with veterans, it sounds like kind of earlier on that you definitely had the pull to it, and you had the pull to this work. Do you think it's when someone's sharing their story, when they're really getting into places they don't normally want to go to, and they're telling their story, talk about how that work with you kind of progressed you, and or just, in general, how did that help? Or do you think it was a help with people sharing their hard to tell stories?
It's interesting that you're asking questions that have been really heavily on my mind lately, just this last week. I've been thinking about these things. Even today, while I was out hiking earlier, these are the things that I was thinking about. I think it's really rare for these people to be seen, to really have people see them and to acknowledge what they feel, because I fully have become aware of the fact that there are no words in the English language that can encompass what people experience in going through war. There are no words, plain and simple. There never will be. And so when someone can tap into that and just meet you exactly where you're at and have empathy because they're feeling something, it really fosters a sense of trust. I had one man tell me that the reason he wanted to keep talking wasn't necessarily because of my intuitive ability, but because I maintained eye contact and I was listening and I kept my mouth shut, which that's a compliment, by the way. That's a good thing. Because someone was interested, and no one had asked him. At that point, it had been like 40 years since he'd come home, and he'd had people make comments like, get over it already. You don't get over something like that. You just learn to shoulder it differently. And so these people were opening up, and then word started going around, hey, there's this chick out there that she'll listen to you. And I actually feel lighter. And people were saying, I feel better. I feel lighter. And they were able to work through things in spirit. I always say I'm just the mouthpiece, because I'm the middleman. Spirit's the one that's providing the information. They're the one doing the actual work. I just have to follow what they guide me to do. But we found that just in witnessing, that was doing a whole lot. And it used to be that people would sit around a fire or gather in groups and be a part of this community where people could share about the things they were going through. And we don't so much do that anymore. But that is, I think, kind of bringing that back where you're able to sit down with a group of men, because that's what it actually progressed into. I started going and visiting reunions that different units were having. And then we would sit in a circle and we would talk about those things, and everyone would share. And I just kind of take everything in and add things where I could. And it was amazing because they were talking about it finally, and they could. So I hope I've answered your question. I feel like I'm
that was a great answer. No, that's great. And I think there is, there is a power to telling stories of, whether it's I think it's more impactful when you're telling your own story, but there is an innate power in storytelling that I think opens people up, whether they know it or not. And it's when you are listening to the story, it's when you're sharing, you're put, for these guys, and I thank them all for their service. And I'm taking part in a fundraiser coming up on May 20th, which I'll talk about after the break, that's benefiting mental health and veterans. And I think it's just so cool, the power of storytelling, especially for these guys and what they went through. And I'll just quickly share. I don't want to be the host that talks the whole time, but I'll just quickly share. I had a similar experience of seeing somebody's experience in Vietnam, where it was my biological father, which I didn't know until my mid-30s. And he and I were just talking, and it was a similar. I started to see this location, and I described everything that happened. The attack that he went through, talked about his buddy who was a spotter, had his name, what everyone called him. He hated the nickname, all this stuff. And my dad says, called in my stepmom and said, hey, how many people have I told this story? And she said, well, just me. But it was really, I could tell it was pretty emotional for him, and in a good way. So I had a similar experience like that too. And so it's very powerful. I never served in I thank veterans all the time, and in active duty, and for them doing that, when I had that experience, I had a different appreciation after that, to see what people go through. It's very powerful. So, okay, enough of my stories.
Oh, honestly, I'm hoping that you'll share more, because I'm just as curious about your experience, but also that is such a gift that you gave to him, and to allow yourself to go there, because that's not easy to see those things.
Right. And to say, hey, I'm seeing this, it's always hard to, start that conversation out there. Oh, we got Annie saying, oh, she happened to her in her later life, discovering the gift. So go ahead and comment if it was, what kind of a challenge was it for you? And we'll keep it going here. So with all this work you're doing, and the amount of energy that goes into both parties, the person you're sitting with, and for you as well, how do you handle spirit exhaustion? I don't know if that's the right term for it, but like, what do you have to say about working with the energy and so much, and like, does it drain you? How do you get out of that? What's your approach?
When I figure it out, I'll tell you.
That's a good answer.
I haven't fully figured it out yet. I get really drained, actually. I will become physically sick if I channel for too long. And And I've only recently learned how to take breaks from that. And really, sometimes I'm going to say this, I don't know if anyone's really talking about it, but I'm going to say it. I think sometimes we can get addicted to channeling, some folks. I definitely have. Even if it drains you, sometimes there's a bit of a draw to walk on that other side of the realm than to be in your 3D world, you know?
Right.
But I do get exhausted. I can feel physically exhausted, get headaches. The way that I deal with it is by grounding myself, really watching what I'm engaging with in my daily life. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I really limiting my contact with things or even people that are maybe not healthy for me? So I have to kind of pick up the slack in my 3D world in order to support what I do on the other side. That's the only way that I've been able to figure it out. But I will say that, especially because I feel like we have some empaths definitely kind of watching this or who are going to watch this, there's a couple things that have helped me. If I'm out in public and I'm getting completely bombarded, like Home Depot is the worst for me, hands down.
Walmart's the worst for me.
I can see that too. I feel like they're one and the same. It's a lot. So I'll run to the bathroom and I'll run my hands quickly under some water, and it cuts the energy for me. It pulls me out of whatever frequency that I'm kind of getting dimmed down to. I've learned how to shield my energy. I try to do that daily, even though I'm absolutely horrible as far as protecting myself. I drive my spirit guides to drink. I just heard not that we need any help or any excuse, but really it's about making sure that I balance my time and what I engage with. And then also making sure I'm not channeling hopefully all the time. I'm actually connecting with this thing now that they call a no dread schedule.
Oh, what's that?
I'm giving myself more time to just be Kay without the constant work. So I'm allowing myself time in between readings now. I'm giving myself days off. Amazing concept that is. And it really helps quite a bit, but there's still a drain. Sometimes I get done with the workday and I don't want to talk to a single soul. I'm talked out.
Right. So, well, I mean, and how you connect with your guides and everything. So, do they kind of know when you're at your limit, and like when you're like, I'm taking a day off, when you're taking one of these breaks, do they usually fuss about it? Like, how does that go?
Like, I love you guys, but no, they're absolutely horrible about it. They try their best. I know that there are certain things where I felt like I've needed a break, or I've gone 3 days without sleep. And I'm like, tonight I'm getting some sleep. Don't bother me. Done. And then I end up having something happen. In fact, there was one time where I went to go to sleep, but this was actually before my first trip to Scotland. I had this really vivid moment where I was sucked back into this older time period. And one of my grandfathers invited two men to, I guess, bury the hatchet. And so he had them over to his home to have a supper. And in reality, after he fed them and they were about to leave, he stabbed them both in the neck.
What?
So I was watching that, and then the individual that hadn't crossed from that experience was acting as if he was going to attack me and said that I had to pay for what my grandfather did. It was just a crazy experience. And I remember being so rattled by that and getting really angry with my spirit guides. And I said, why would you do that? I've been asking for a break. And then you have this huge moment come in. And my family was worried. They said I turned white as a whiter. And it was not a good thing. I was off for a while, and they said, well, there are some things that you're just going to have to see because it's going to enrich you. And we see things from that higher perspective. So you may want the break, but there's sometimes when you have to see something. And it actually played into that first trip. It helped me realize something I needed to understand.
Wow.
So sometimes I don't get that break when I need to. They're actually telling me there's a lot that you don't see. So I have to give them more credit. I'm coming off as a completely spoiled brat here, somebody that's really ungrateful with my guides. I do love them and they do quite a bit for me, but sometimes, I chose this path ultimately. So I have to take everything.
Yeah. And time so relative, right? And time so different on that side versus what you feel it is, what I feel it is. And so you may be wanting a break, but it might be that right moment, right? Where that right time that they're like, this is the time. And I guess you kind of just have to go with it and then try and take get your break when you can. You know, you got to kind of work with it a little bit. I think it's funny that they're just like ready to roll all the time.
That's the best way anyone's put it. But yeah, they're ready to roll all the time.
Yeah.
Me, not so much. I feel like a lot of times they're waiting on me.
Right. And anybody out there listening, feel free to comment too. When you start, like when you sit down with a client, or if it's on virtual or whatever, or if you sit down, oftentimes for you, are you like ready to go right from when you sit down, or does it take you a few minutes, like they're waiting on you and then stuff starts flowing for you?
So I do a lot of pre-channeling before I even meet the client, before I even see them.
Cool.
Sometimes it's days or weeks happening, and I just think it's a thought that I've had. And then I find out that wasn't the case. I was actually channeling. So I'll have pages of notes before we even get to meet each other. And then I go through those notes. So there's no leading. So everything's organic. And then we see where we land. And I continue to channel throughout the session. So I'm ready to go sometimes before that person even reaches out to me. I'll know, all right, I've got something. Let's just see if somebody reaches out. So that's usually how it happens. It comes in before I even see someone sometimes.
Have you, like, how did you learn to recognize, something coming through? Like, do you ever know who it's for? Like, say the person hasn't reached out yet. Do you have an idea of who it is? Or, like, I guess let me back up. How do you recognize that something is coming in before you even have a reading with somebody?
It feels different. I don't always catch it. There are times where I will not catch it. And like I was saying earlier, I'll think it's just my regular thought happening, because it comes through the dialogue of my own inner voice. A lot of times, if it's not clairaudient, clear hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times I'll start thinking of someone. I'll just have them pop up in my mind, and then I'll get impressions, or I'll get the impressions first and then they pop up in my mind. But sometimes I don't catch it. I think that it's something pertaining to myself or something I need to be aware of. Yeah. And then the next day or 2 days later, that's what we're jumping into. And I often will tell my clients, oh, I think this was for you.
Right.
And we connect the dots. So sometimes I'm completely in the dark because what I'm channeling is not my life. It's someone else's. So because it's not my experience, sometimes I'm completely in the dark as to who until it's revealed. Yeah.
It's always tricky. And I agree with, it feels different. It happens for me sometimes. I'll get stuff before reading starts, a few hours or a day, or I'll hear a name over and over, and not, well, who the hell is this for? And not till I'm in a reading, like, oh, wait a second, I think I wrote this name down a couple days ago. So it's very interesting how all that works. And we're going to get into more of that. I want to talk about your journeys to Scotland, that whole side of things. When we come back, we're here on WLTK-DB.com. I'm your host, Peter Abea. We're here with special guest, psychic medium Kay MacBean-Peden, and we're going to be right back here. Hang on tight. We'll see you on the flip side.
The Body Code is a revolutionary method of energetic healing developed by Dr. Bradley Nelson, which allows us to quickly and easily identify specific imbalances that seem to underline chronic ill health, acute and chronic pain and discomfort, dysfunction, and stress. Ellie energetically connects with the subconscious of the client. Psychic medium Ellie Weisensell is a medical intuitive and energy healer, and a certified body code practitioner. She identifies and clears energetic imbalances within the body and energy field. Contact Ellie at the website below, and Ellie can work remotely from a distance, by phone, online, video chat. There's no need to travel to an office. Remember, the Body Code is safe for humans and animals. Contact Ellie today.
welcome back to the Paranormal Pete Show. I'm your host, Peter Bay, and we're here with Kay. We're talking about mediumship and kind of how things work differently and some of the challenges and getting time for yourself, which is hard enough to do in the 3D world. I feel like sometimes is getting time to be in your own mind, listen to your own inner voice, wind down, whatever it is. And so I applaud your guides for pushing you, but they need to give you a break every once in a while.
Y'all hear that?
Did you hear that? And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about your guides if I could.
Yeah.
Just in so I know in my own journey, things have changed about every couple of years. Information comes in a little differently, or it just keeps building, and there's some changes every couple of years. Talk about what kind of change you've kind of gone through over the years with how you get information and working with your guides.
So it's interesting because my guides have changed out since I was a little girl. They've changed out through different periods of my lifetime, actually. And I've noticed, and they've explained this to me in terms of, there are certain guides that are here to help you with certain things at certain times. And a lot of times, if they have been human at one point or another, they've gone through a lot of the things that are similar to what you're going through. And they have a special way of communicating with you that just helps you get it. So they've changed out actually within the last 7-ish years. And then I had my Scottish ancestors coming in. And so the way that they relate things to me is often through images and senses and even songs that I'm familiar with to help me kind of click it all together. But when I was a child, I was receiving information I didn't know anything about. They were showing me images from World War I. So I mean, as a 4 or 5-year-old child, what would I know about World War I except for I'm extremely fearful of this tank coming at me and being pulled into that experience. So I think in some ways they've learned to soften things and help me to feel more of a buffer now, whereas before I didn't have as much of one, unless I'm not afforded that with that example about, my grandfather and that experience. But the way that they will relate things, if it has to be intense, I get it full bore, and they're there with me. Yeah. I have a big team that's usually surrounding me. But then there's times where I do have more of a buffer, and it's like I'm observing things like it's a movie.
Yeah.
And I know it's like a movie, But other times you get sucked into the body or the experience as that person. And those are the ones that I really appreciate because you understand a lot when you come out of it.
Yeah.
But man, it's unpleasant sometimes.
Yes, I've had few experiences like that. And I don't know, I'm okay being on the outside looking, it is very intense, and it becomes very taxing on you physically too. When, at least for me, if I have an experience where I'm somebody else, in the movie in my head or whatever, and I'm experiencing what they're experiencing, I often feel pretty wiped after that, dehydrated. I got to drink a ton of water. It's fairly taxing on me, which is why I'm not pushing myself to try physical mediumship because I feel like that would be very taxing for me. I mean, what is it taxing for you, or is it just an intense experience, and once you're out of it, you're out of it?
I've learned to deal with it over time a little better. I used to shut the curtains and cry for days if I could afford to do so. Sometimes I will definitely feel how the body has been impacted, or sometimes it will be kind of like if you're watching a surgical procedure on TV and you start to get pain where they're operating, the area in my body becomes sensitive just because of what I've seen. Mentally, it can be more taxing than physically, actually, for me. It seems like the emotional impact, because I'm a super emotional, watery person, I cry a lot. That's the way it impacts me the most. And then when I work through those emotions, eventually I will feel physically lighter. Honestly, I do get tired, but I really think that the emotional impact is the worst for me overall.
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. I can relate to the emotional part of it too, but it's the physical part, I think, that for me, that it's draining. And so it just shows everybody gets affected a little differently, right? I do have kind of a fun question that my wife asks all the time. Not all the time, but it's something she's asked before, and it's an interesting question. And so Molly, if you're watching, you know, you can type in how it should be asked, but where are your guides? Where are these spirits?
Oh, well, they've started to kind of explain it to me in a way that I can understand. And they always preface it that way, which I don't know what that means.
They're like, here you go, dummy.
Basically, they might as well hand me that old Spiritualism for Dummies handbook.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I don't know if there is one. Is there one? There might be one.
Probably.
I have one for everything. But from what I understand, they are usually when I don't see them, they're in the realm right next to me. I just can't perceive them in that moment. And I'm not supposed to, because sometimes I'm like, where are you guys at? And I'll feel kind of alone if they pull back. Those have been the scariest times, by the way, because I feel very vulnerable.
Yeah.
But when they are around, they're just right here with me. And it's like it's like a curtain, usually is how they describe it. It's kind of like the curtain's closed. They're there on the other side, just on the other side of the curtain, doing their thing. God knows what. But then when the curtain's open again, I see them. And that's how they explain the realm. They say it's not up here, it's not down there, it's not anywhere but amongst us. And I think that's the best way that I can understand it is once you perceive it. I mean, it depends on how open you become. I mean, that world blends together pretty well.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting explanation, and I agree in the sense that I think they're just here, there, everywhere. You know, among us. They could be. I mean, I feel a couple of my guides are somewhere up in the stars. I don't know exactly where they're from, but 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 that space between us doesn't matter. You know, that all doesn't matter. So I think it's interesting, and I do agree in the sense that I think spirits, guides, you know, whatever we're talking about is among us. It's just our physical bodies can't perceive it, which is why we rely on our soul and our energy and our highest and best self to reach to that other side. So the great answer. I love that. Let's talk about going to Scotland, because I'm interested in what I keep seeing for you is this broken sword with, I feel like I want to say it's a broken sword laying on a ripped up English flag. There's red and white on this flag, but it's like this broken sword. Does that mean anything to you?
So many things that I probably shouldn't say.
Oh,
no, I'm joking. Kind of. Yeah, it does.
Well, to start off with, tell us about like what was your draw to connect with your roots? Was it, you know, were you pushed to it, like voluntold? You know, what was it?
That's a really great. Yeah, actually, yes, definitely voluntold. I wanted to know where I came from because I felt like I didn't fit in with my family so much. I was so different. I felt like there was something missing.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a DNA test, and I came into my parents' lives later. Most people were passed on. And so I really didn't get to know my family very much. And nobody talks in my family except for myself. And all of a sudden, all of these documents are popping up and these names are popping up. Some of them aren't in English, but I keep noticing something. There's a date that keeps popping up, April 16th, 1746. And so I'm thinking, okay, what happened? What happened here? And then I found out that it was the Battle of Culloden. But then alongside that, I started getting these different documents and all of this information about this family, the Stuarts. And I think they're the ones that I struggle with the most because it ended up being the royal Stuarts and the ones that were the monarchs of Scotland and England and sometimes Ireland. So in being voluntold, I found out that I'm the generational healer of my family. And it's basically my job to work through all of the familial wounds. And in my case, I found out that I have one side of my family because the family had been there forever, back to the basically caveman days.
Okay.
That's the earliest origin that we've found. And so you have the royals over here, and then you have the have-nots over here. And then it all culminated in decisions that this family made on this side, which a lot of them weren't so great. And it greatly affected the family on this side that ultimately paid the price for it. And that's not even touching the English. That's just me mentioning the culpability in my own family with that.
Okay.
So that's been kind of hard. You find out that you're at this apex and you're supposed to figure it all out and do the familial healing with it. And so my guides just flat out told me, all right, so here's the deal. There's all this stuff you don't know about. We'll explain it later. We're going to Scotland. I'm like, what? And so I literally on a whim got a plane ticket and went. Just no question.
And I mean, what was it like when you got over there? Did you find what you were looking for? Let's go there. And then how did you get there?
Oh, Lord. Okay. So many things. I'm going to try to make this.
We got 15 minutes.
Okay. So here's what happened. I get there, and my first night, I was kind of complaining about the stewards because, you have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm finding out all this information about different decisions that were made, and I'm upset about it because of the impact on everybody else.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was complaining about it. And that night I got up to get a drink of water, my first night in the flat in Edinburgh, and it's dark, and I run into this solid figure that's suddenly right in front of me, and he's bigger than me. And I shrieked. I didn't know what was going on. I ended up falling into a mirror that was behind where he was standing. And I saw James Stewart, one of my grandfathers, James VI. And that was not a good experience. So it was kind of a humbling moment, and it was supposed to be intimidating. And I stopped complaining after that, even though I'm still kind of complaining now, but forgive me. And then I went to Culloden Battlefield, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I literally fell to my knees and I sobbed, and it was hard to get through. And I started getting all these stories, and I saw all these different spirits that were around there. And it was like they were waiting for me, like they knew that I was coming. Some of them were family, some of them weren't. And that entire trip helped me piece together really the weight that I was dealing with and the karmic debt that I was dealing with. But also I was completely overwhelmed with just the greatest sorrow I have ever felt in my life. And I thought that I had been through some things in my life that caused me to feel things, but this was greater than anything I've ever experienced. In my bones, I felt something break inside of me. But at the same time, I was experiencing a lot of joy too, because we have people in the current generations that are here. And so there was a lot of love there. I went into that trip not expecting that so much, because I figured I'm going there, I'm just going to go see these things. But I had people embracing me left and right, and so kind and so helpful and just really loving, like they'd known you their entire life.
Wow.
And so it was kind of a weird thing, a weird dynamic where I'm facing all this familial stuff, but I've got these amazing people, these beautiful people that are here that are just so open and so loving. And so I was kind of balancing that out, but also noticing that there are echoes of the past that still affect the current day. So it's really hard to sum it up.
That I can imagine what it must have felt like to go to the battlefield and just have it soak through you, just being there. Do you kind of feel like you were there in that time? Have you ever had those sort of visions or feelings?
Yes. But I'd been tucking it down. It's funny because I was thinking that on my hike today as well. I don't know. I must have been connecting with you earlier, but I was thinking about the fact that my last trip on my way home, my last trip in November, the guy that took me to the airport, he was so lovely. But one of the things that he said, because I was visiting cousins that actually still live in the Highlands, and he made the comment, those folks up there are kind of weird.
Nice.
And he was trying to see what reaction I would give him. But then I've been thinking about it ever since. I'm like, I'm kind of weird, but it's not being weird. It's just connecting to things that are very sacred and have existed for a long time. But I have been getting visions and a lot of dreams, and I've had the recurring dream that's kind of hard, but of being out on the battlefield and actually holding someone as they were going.
Wow. And
it was while there were Hanoverian soldiers bayoneting people, because the Jacobites laid there for 3 days. on the battlefield while they were being
Wow.
finished off. And I just
Jeez.
keep being pulled into that. And somewhere in my heart, I just kind of know. So there's this weird thing, because one of the things that spirit keeps telling me is that I keep reincarnating into the same family line, not going other places. So it's like I keep coming back into this life trying to get it right. I'm gonna be coming back for a very long time. I'm sure you can already figure that one out.
Who knows? You might get it one of these times.
We're talking about me. So, I don't know. I do feel that there are certain things that I believe in, certain ways that I am, that don't vibe with this modern world. But when I found people even now that live in the Highlands, there is something that is so familiar and relieving in meeting them. Like, oh, wow, there you are. And you're aligned with these things. Me too. Somebody else feels this way. But then also walking amongst the ones who have passed on the battlefield, some of them are familiar, really familiar.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much interconnectedness with, so many different things. And what an incredible experience. And I hope you get to keep exploring that and learning more about that. Do you feel like anybody out there where, I kind of feel like everybody has psychic abilities. It's just whether you recognize them and use them or don't use them or whatever. But, I mean, when you did the DNA test and you started to look into it from that side of things, I feel like for me as well, when I did DNA tests, I know for my wife, Molly, some eye-opening things. And I think, but it opens you up. I mean, do you think the journey you've been on so far, like, is that helping you progress spiritually? Is it helping you grow more spiritually?
Very much so. Every time that I go to Scotland, my gifts get that much more attuned. It's a lot to anchor that in and to ground it out.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'm gathering these experiences. So the more that I'm experiencing those different emotions and feelings, the more that I'm able to access them on a deeper level with the people I'm working with. And I can apply what I'm learning to their situation and bring more to the table, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
That's reason for just going anyway.
Right.
But it's helping me to grow. I'm becoming more grateful for my life and what I do have. And it's interesting because you mentioned the broken sword. And, we just had some things go on in the UK. We had a coronation, and there's some feelings with that, which, there would be.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, what happened ultimately at the Battle of Culloden was the end of the Stuart monarchy, like the complete end. There was no changing it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that has been brought up for me is helping to cultivate people that have these experiences, helping to cultivate their sense of self and to connect with those stories. Wink, wink.
Okay.
Because this story is also your story. I know that you're Irish, but your family were Ulster Scots.
I'm mostly Scottish, finding out by DNA. Thought Irish, always thought Irish. Very small percentage of that, actually, but it's mostly Scottish. So yeah, I feel, well, it just gives further proof of the more you can look within and learn about yourself, and not like in the physical sense necessarily, but in the spiritual sense as well, that the more open you become. And like for you with, your gifts and getting stronger, more tuned when you've gone over and had this visceral experience in a place that you come from, it's just more proof that the more you look within into your DNA, into your spiritual self, like the more you open and grow. And right, I mean, that's what I get from it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've been told I'm supposed to do is help people do that ancestral healing, because it's not just me. I can go to the battlefield now and have different feelings than when I first arrived. I can connect actually with the joy of the fact that they just were, the fact that they existed, and how hard they worked and how dedicated they worked and how beautiful they were. I get to connect with those feelings more now when I'm actually at the battlefield. But there are others who are just starting this process or haven't started it, when they go to the battlefield, they could drop to their knees too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just starting that process. So if I can help people connect, even just encouraging folks to start learning Gaelic, it's kind of sowing seeds and kind of bringing healing to each family line that people come from.
Very cool. Very cool. We're almost out of time. This show goes by so quick. What would you give advice? What advice would you give for people that maybe have discovered their own gift, but don't know what to do next? For all the people, because I think there's a lot of people out there that there's more and more. There's a big awakening going on, I think, out there. And so there's a lot of people, maybe somebody listening is just kind of maybe questioning things, right? You're at the stage of, okay, what the hell is going on here? What advice do you give somebody who's recognized psychic and spiritual gifts? What would you tell them to do next?
So a couple of things. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with yourself as you're going through these experiences, and trust your gut. One of the biggest stumbling blocks is trusting what you receive, and spirit will give it to you 100% every time. We just work and practice on our interpretation, and you're going to get it. You're going to get it. But the more that you cultivate a relationship with your spirit guides, like I'll sit in my PJs with a cup of coffee weekly, and I will have meetings with my spirit guides. And even if you can't see them and you don't know their names, just talk about what's on your heart. Bring them into your life, because you're cultivating a two-way relationship. You start walking their way, they're going to start walking yours. And that relationship will strengthen just like it would with another human being. Start speaking about what you're experiencing. Share it with someone that you trust. The more that you are willing to trust, the clearer that information is going to come. The faith that you display will show spirit you're serious about doing this. They'll start handing you more and more all the time. And it's just this relationship that you're cultivating. And I believe everyone has abilities. Everyone matters, and everyone is special and has this ability to tap into these different channels, and everyone has their own unique gifts. So we all have these feelers that we're born with, and some of us roll into it with those feelers completely attuned and ready to go, and some of us have those feelers activated later in life, but we all have them. It takes just the willingness to explore and to ask questions. And so that's the big thing, is just making the effort to connect, and then also seeking out someone you can ask questions of. Support. Like
a mentor, sort of, or somebody you can call and go, what the hell's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really important. And I've talked about it on the show many times. William Becker was kind of my mentor. He saw what I was going through, and so it is crucial to have somebody that you can ask questions to. I'm glad you bring that up, because I think it's very important for anybody out there who's kind of starting to experience things, awaken to things. Like, you got to find somebody that you trust. It's got to, don't just look somebody up you never met before and start barraging them with a bunch of stuff. You got to go with somebody, right?
It's so important, because their heart has to be in the right place. I fully believe that if you're going to offer something, it's got to be in the interest of purity of service, purity of heart. That's the only way that we give someone a gift or really love someone or support them. Yeah. So make sure that that person is genuine and their heart's in the right place, and you can never go wrong.
Exactly. Real quick, what's, how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you to get a reading from you? Learn more about the equine work you're doing? Where can people find you to learn more about that stuff?
Well, they can always reach me at my email. I'll go with the business one. Well, Nee-an-an-doe-hass. Maybe I ought to post that somewhere, but red.etsy.store. I'm just expecting people to know Gaelic and type it in. Red.etsy.store.
Easiest language, right up there with the Basque language. Super easy language to learn, guys.
No problem. 10 years to become fluent. No big deal. But red.etsy.store. And then my email, the easiest one is k.peden97103 at Gmail. And that's my personal email, which I don't mind sharing. If people have questions or want to inquire about a reading, that's another way to get a hold of me.
Go ahead and say it again for those who are going to feverishly try and write it down.
So it's a letter K .eden97103 at Gmail.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing everything that you did tonight. These conversations always go so quick, so we'll have to have you back on the show by fall or in the fall, I would say, and see what you're up to at that point. And I'll try send me a link to your Etsy shop, and I will post that on the on my show page, facebook.com/Paranormal Pete Show. That way people know how to get in touch with you. And we'll go from there. We had a good friend of the show, Mike Beers. I don't know if you met him before. Hey, Mike, sorry I didn't put this up earlier. And Annie's saying, yay, definitely have her back. We will.
Annie.
And she says, thank you both. And Kay, I thank you so much for taking time and sharing all that you did. It's always cool to hear other perspectives, and the kind of work you're doing, I think is great. And I hope you can keep it up and keep growing it and expanding and helping more people. And we'd definitely love to have you back on the show here. Any last final words you'd like to say?
Yeah, it's been a huge privilege. And I've been itching to ask you questions this whole time because I'm really interested in your experience and what this has been like for you. But I'm really grateful that you asked me. It is honestly a privilege, and it's just been really cool chatting with you. So thank you for listening to my ramblings for an hour.
Mine too. The people who listen to the show are used to that, I think. But no, I appreciate everything that you shared, and thanks so much. People, get a hold of Kay if you're interested in getting a reading from her, or learning about more of the work that she's doing, and heck, just maybe seeing how your next journey goes back home. But be sure to tune in next week and stay tuned to the station all week here at WLTK-DB.com. I'm your host, Pete Orbea, and we're with special guest Kay MacBean-Peden. Thanks again. And my final message to everybody, I got to get a new quote. I've been promising it for a while, but my main message is always to be present. Take some time to be present. It's hard to do that in this, in these days. It's just hard to stop thinking about yesterday, what you should have done. Stop thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, and take some time each day to be present. Be with the ones you're with. Hug the ones you love. Be there with them. Do that a little bit each day, and I hope you'll find that helps you out in your everyday life. And until next week from the Paranormal Pete Show, hope everyone has a great week, and thanks again, Kay.
And thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTK-DB.com.